Foddian games. Everyone's making them, but they're all boring and the same. They have a bald man with some deficiency climbing up something for some reason. Why are they always bald and white? Why can't they be pink with no arms or legs and just kind of more tube-like? Maybe a couple ridges and they squirm up something instead. Okay, so you may have guessed I want to make a game about being a worm. The only real worm game I've seen is one where they fire missiles at each other, and as far as my research has gone, that's not what worms do. And people love worms, so why aren't there more wormy games? Sounds like an opportunity to make something unique. And an opportunity to spend the next 9 months of my life to make something that you can buy on Steam for like $5, maybe cheaper. You should buy my game, by the way. But how do you control a worm and make it explore a world? My first thought was making it bunch up and then release, and slowly crawling and digging into the earth. Unfortunately, that sounds way too complicated to implement, or perhaps fortunately, because that would have been a really boring game, and because this made me look around for videos on how worms move in real life. And now, let me introduce you to the Asian jumping worm. This little guy jumps like crazy, so how can we put this into Godot? I'm making this game in Godot, by the way. Well, we start off with a rope, which is just a bunch of ovals held together with joints. Then we take this rope, make it worm length, and apply a force to the head when the player charges it up. And with that, you can flick around a pink line. And with a little bit of polish, you can play with your little worm. And yes, that was an initial title idea. And after flicking the worm, I realized something. This was fun, even though there was only a couple of little ledges to hop around on. So it was time to make a world. Usually in Foddian games, the world is split into lots of different themed sections, like the pool section that goes into the construction section in Getting Over It. Loosely defined vibes the player goes between. And the first section acts as a baseline for the absurdity to build on. So what was the first section for a worm world? Well, obviously it was gonna be the garden. Making the level was simple. I would draw something up I thought would be cool to jump on, I'd put it in Godot, I'd draw the collision on top of it, and I'd test it to make sure the jump was possible. There was probably a smarter way to test this, but for the first level, it didn't matter too much. And later I would actually split the drawings into individual assets, so I didn't have to edit the photos if I wanted to move a platform. And here's the garden. We start out just in the dirt. Couple holes to navigate that I ripped from my testing world. Then we come across a flower. This is kind of the first big challenge to teach the player to jump up high. Still no real risk in the jumps, and that theme continues as the jumps get a little harder and the risks stay pretty low. That is, until the player reaches the leaves. This is the true test of skill and courage. You jump across the leaves, risking tens of minutes of gameplay. Literal tens. And the further you go along, the earlier in the map you'll drop to. I don't know if you can tell, but I was really starting to have fun with this. I found myself spending more time jumping around than I did developing. So I decided it was time for a closed alpha. Is there something before an alpha? Because if so, this was it, because the game was rough. So I forced my friends to play it. And after convincing them this probably wouldn't break their computer, they did. And they liked it. This was one of the most valuable parts of the process because it gave me external feedback. Things my brain hadn't thought of yet. I also started posting on Reddit and surprisingly also got some good feedback. Shout out to r/Godot. Everyone there is lovely. So with all that feedback, it's time for a quick fire round of all the changes I implemented. First up, we got blurring the background. Apparently the background wasn't clear enough to some people. They thought that maybe they'd land on the fence. So I put a blur shader, added some dynamics so that it moves slower than you move through the map. So it had some depth. Next up, I made it so that the charging changes color. This is just a little more clear than the lines, so you can see when you're fully charged. It starts green, then turns to red. Then next, I realized, huge bug, huge mistake. The charging was dependent on your FPS. Because when you're in Godot, the game will always run at 60 FPS. So the charging was always consistent to me. But when you export it, it's not like that. And so it basically meant that if you had a better computer, you could jump harder, faster, and basically you could fly. Terrible bug. And then I also added skins. This is because around this time the banana game on Steam was kind of going crazy, so I thought it'd be kind of funny. But at the moment it just randomly selects a skin for you whenever you load up the game. And there's a 1 in 1,000 chance of it being gold. So keep reloading if you want the gold worm. Finally, I added hats. And this is because my friend was speedrunning the game and I thought it'd be a cool reward if you beat the game fast enough, you'd get a hat. So yeah, you should see if you can get the hat. Yeah. Exhausted because I was starting to feel it a little too. Okay. Now it's time to step away from game dev a bit and tell you about one of the reasons I decided to really stick with the game. And that was a small local game event called Let's Break Games. If I was really going to make this something, I'd have to get the opinion of game developers. This event was awesome. There were actual professors who teach game design telling me they liked my game. And at one point there was even a crowd who had formed around my table for watching one guy play it. It was really validating. There was also someone who had a worm plush with them, so I knew it was a sign. I had to finish this game. Oh, and I'd finally gotten a name for the game from someone there. I'd kill you as a worm. Because I haven't told you yet, but the game is about being turned into a worm, being broken up with, and having to kill your ex-boyfriend to get revenge. So after building up loads of momentum and being ready to make this game, the whole thing planned, and it was going to be the best game ever in the whole world, and I was going to be the guy who made it, and everyone would chant my name, and all the streamers would play it and be amazing, and I'd be rich and famous. I lost Steam. Not the game publishing site. I'd actually finally gotten the store page set up, where you should go buy the game, by the way. No. I'd gotten myself so worked up that I couldn't work on it. Nothing was good enough. All the ideas I had sucked. There are so many things that go into a game. So I did the only thing I could. I started chipping away. I would slowly chip here or there, but the little things that a game needs slowly started to build up. Things like controller support, camera systems, dialogue systems, a main menu, settings, all the boring stuff that isn't making new areas or mechanics. And it ended up that in my spare time, I'd either be playing the game, procrastinating, making things, or in very, very rare cases, actually working on stuff. And that's how I spent the next 7 months. Slowly chipping away, slowly losing steam. I'd always thought that with just one good month, I could finish my game. But it's really not that simple. Once the world was all done, I realized just how much polish it would need if it was going to be #1 greatest game of all time in the world ever. So let's have a look at how I made the game just that bit cooler. Something that wasn't even a want but a need was SFX and VFX. Simple stuff like sounds from drills and dust coming out of all of them, all the way to the more complex stuff. Like, how do I work out the difference between the player falling on the ground to just sliding against it? The answer? Normals. If you calculate the velocity that's normal to the surface the worm hits, you can set a threshold for the particles and even make the impact sound louder the harder the player hits the ground. pretty neat. Another thing that I added was water. And look, I'd love to explain the math on this, but I did just steal the code, so it kind of feels unethical. Besides, it's a load of nerd math. You probably don't want to hear it. And if you are a mega nerd, you can go check out Ponty Pants' video about his difficult climbing game, where he basically does the same thing, but probably a lot better. I also added a Steam achievement for beating the game, and maybe I'll add some more hidden ones for doing silly things. And I made the camera zoom around to a lot of points of interest during dialogue scenes. It's a little bit janky and should probably be remade, but it works and shows the player what they need to see and is fully controlled in the dialogue system, which, trust me, really cool. But that's the game complete. There's a lot more to the story, like having it in Steam Next Fest, having YouTubers play the demo, and how I almost ruined the game right after making the garden. Oh, and how I made the whole story that I put in the game. Kind of forgot about that, but this video is long enough, so that would have to be for a part 2, if anyone would want that. Now you should go buy the game. If you've watched this whole video, you may as well. How is a worm gonna kill their boyfriend? Don't you want to know? But hey, it's pretty hard, so I doubt you could beat it anyway.